Question 2b says a school bus object corresponds to one bus route and holds a list of students assigned to that bus. School bus extends array list of student. School bus has a constructor that creates a bus with a given number of seats. The school bus's Boolean method is full returns true if there are no vacant seats left on the bus. Otherwise, it returns false. And it tells us to write the entire school bus class. Do not duplicate any methods inherited from array list of student. So any method that array list has in general, we will have access to those methods as well if we use the right if we write our code correctly. So it asks us to write the entire class. So anytime we write a class, we're going to start public class, the name of the class, which is school bus. And then it told us that school bus holds a list of students, and that they actually tell us it extends array list. Okay. So this extends an array list of student objects. Okay. So sometimes when we build a list, we'll write a class and we'll add a list inside and then add some methods. This allows us to actually refer to school bus as a list in and of itself. Okay, as opposed to like calling a list that's in the class. School bus is considered a list now. All right. It is an array list of student objects. So imagine a bus is simply holding a bunch of students, figuratively and obviously with our code. And it represents holding the students in real life and obviously in our code here in this list. So what we want to do is we want to understand that we are supposed to be using a constructor. I'm just looking through the code here, the problem statement. So it says the school bus has a constructor that creates a bus with a given number of seats. So they're going to give us a number of seats, we build the bus with that many seats. So that must mean if we're going to build so many seats on the bus, we need, every school bus has that property. It's going to have a number of seats. So since this is a property, this is an instance variable, the number of seats, what type of data would that be? Hopefully you realize that would have to be an integer, not a double or Boolean or something like that. So we store the number of seats, and I'll just call it num seats. We store that as an instance variable, a property of the school bus. So then when we use our constructor that takes in, that creates a bus with a given number of seats, remember constructors, they're public, then the name of the class. This is to build a school bus object, then they have to tell us how many seats. So maybe we just call this parameter num. All right, that actually looks a little weird. Let me fix that. So then they give us this number value, and then that represents the number of seats. So to establish this, we're simply going to say seats equals num. Okay. So we established the number of seats on the bus. Now, think about the methods. So when we say extends array list, we're automatically giving a lot of power to the school bus. If we want to add a student to the bus, we just say whatever the name of the bus is, maybe b1.add, and then we give it a student. Okay. We want to remove a student in a certain position, we would say b1.remove. So all the methods that are listed there on your AP subset handout that goes along with your test, those methods apply to this school bus. So I don't need to make a method that like adds a student or removes a student or things like that. What I do need to do is include a Boolean method, so a method that returns a Boolean. We can do public Boolean, and the name of the method is full, which checks and sees is the bus full. So it returns true if there are no vacant seats left on the bus. So if we have as many students as we have seats, then we return true, it's full. If they're not the same, there are fewer seats, if there are fewer students than seats, then it is false. Okay. So it doesn't take any parameters, but remember, school bus extends a list, so that means it is an array list of students. So I can figure out how many students I have in my list on the bus by taking the name of the bus and calling the size method. But since we're actually referring to the current bus, I don't need the dot notation like b1 dot size to get the size. I just need to say size and that returns the size of the bus. So what I want to do is I want to check and see if, let me actually scoot this down, sorry, that ended up on the same line. So to get the number of students, I'm going to use the size method, which finds the size of this list, how many objects, how many students are in the list. And I'm going to say if I have as many students on this bus, by calling the size method, if that number of students fills up the number of seats. So if we have as many students as we have seats, and I just realized, let me back up here a second, I didn't write this variable correctly. That should have said, let me mark that out, num seats. Okay. So the number of seats, we were using num seats to represent that value. So if the size, the number of students in the list, when I call the size method that's inherited from array list, and get how many students we have, if that equals the number of seats, then that means the bus is full. So I want to return true. And any other case, so I could use an else statement here, or I could just throw this in. I'll just go ahead and say, if that doesn't execute, then it'll skip down to this line, and that must mean that they were not equal, so the bus is not full. So we're going to return false. Okay. So that actually is all we need. Just checking back over the information here. We have our constructor that creates a bus with a given number of seats. We store that number of seats, and then we have a method that checks to see are there any seats left on the bus. So we checked how many students were in the list by calling the size method. Check to see if that equaled how many seats we had. If they were equal, it means every seat was taken. It's true. If not, it's false. So it looks like, yes, we have accomplished all the purposes of this method and of this class. So that is now question 2b. So we wrote a method in part A to find the distance between two students on the same street. And we also wrote this class to build a school bus to hold students. So now you're going to go into part C, where you're looking at this school transport that is going to actually handle how assignments are given out for a given school. Okay? So move on to question C, try that out, and see how you do.